Monster Mama. 1, 2, 3, 4, and more. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Meow, meow, meow. We are on the next chapter. I believe it's gonna be the 7th chapter. And then we'll be here with A Secret Garden by author Frances Hodgson Burnett. We're gonna skip a bit of recap, 'cause if you really want it, you can go back to get it and then return awesome. Yeah. Alrighty, so the chapters we're looking at, sorry about being distracted here, are all going to be So we've got um, the key to the gardens, the last place we were at. So now that we've got the key to the garden, we need to look at the robin who showed the way. Oh my goodness. Is that what I meant to do? The robin who showed the way. So the last thing that happened was that the robin was Twitter, and said, look at this key that she found. She looked at the key quite a long time. She turned it over and over and thought about it. As I have said before, she was not a child who had been trained to ask permission or consult her elders about things. All she thought about the key was that if it was the key to the closed garden, and she could find out where the door was, she could perhaps open it and see what was inside the walls and what had happened to those old rose trees. It was because it had been shut up so long that she wanted to see it. It seemed as if it must be different from other places, and that something strange must have happened to it during 10 years. Besides that, if she liked it, she could go into it every day and shut the door behind her, and she could make up some play of her own and play it quite alone, because nobody would ever know where she was, but would think the door was still locked and the key buried in the earth. The very thought of it pleased her very much. Living, as it were, all by herself in a house with 100 mysteriously closed rooms, and having nothing whatever to do to amuse herself, had set her inactive brain to working, chick, 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 and was actually awakening her imagination. Imagination. There is no doubt that the fresh, strong, pure air from the moor had had a great deal with it. So, just as it had given her an appetite, and fighting with the wind had stirred her blood, so the same things had stirred her mind and body. In India she had always been too hot and languid and weak to care much about anything. But in this place she was beginning to care and want to do new things. Already she felt less contrary, though she did not know why. She put the key in her pocket and walked up and down her walk. No one but herself ever seemed to come there, so she could watch slowly and look at the wall, or sometimes a little keyhole. Or rather at the ivy growing on it. The ivy was the baffling thing. Howsoever carefully she looked, as she could see nothing but thickly growing, glossy, dark green leaves. She was very much disappointed. Something of her contrariness came back to her as the system indicated. Do, 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 do. But yeah, she was very much disappointed. Something of her contrariness came back to her as she paced the walk and looked over it at the tree tops inside. It seemed so silly, she said to herself, to be near it and not able to get in. She took the key in her pocket, which she now had. All right. It seemed so silly, she said to herself, to be near it and not be able to get in. She took the key in her pocket when she went back to the house, and she made up her mind that she would always carry it with her when she went out, so that if she ever should find the hidden door, she would be ready. Mrs. Medlock had allowed Martha to sleep all night at the cottage, but she was back at work in the morning with cheeks redder than ever and in the best of spirits. Mm. I got up at 4 o'clock, she said. It was pretty on the moor, with the birds getting up and the rabbits scampering about and the sun rising. I didn't want to walk all the way. A man gave me a ride in his cart, and I can tell you I did enjoy myself. She was full of stories of the delights of her day out. Her mother had been glad to see her, and they had got the baking and the washing all out of the way. She had even made each of the kittens dough cake with a bit of brown sugar in it. I had 'em all piping hot when they came from playing on the moor, and the cottage all smelled of nice, clean, hot bacon, and there was a good fire, and they just shouted for joy. Mhm. Ah, Dickon he said our cottage was good enough for a king to live in. In the evening they all sat around the fire, and Martha and her mother had sewed patches on torn clothes and mended stockings, and Martha had mhm, mhm. Yes, so in the evening they all sat round the fire, and Martha and her mother had sewn patches on torn clothes and mended stockings, and Martha had told about the little girl who had come from India, and who had been waited on all her life by what Martha called blacks until she didn't know how to put on her own stockings. Let's ignore the casual racism for now. It's an error of its printing. But mhm. Ah, they did like to hear about you, said Martha. They wanted to know about the blacks and you being the ship that came in. I couldn't tell them enough. Mary reflected a little bit. I'll tell you a great deal more before your next day out, she said, so that you will have more to talk about. I dare say that they would like to hear about riding or an elephant on a tiger. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Phew. But yeah, Mary reflected a little. I'll tell you a secret. Hmm. I'll tell you a great deal more before your next day out, she said, so that you'll be able to talk about it. I dare say they would like to hear about riding elephants and camels, and about the officers going to hunt tigers. My word! cried delighted Martha. It would set 'em clean off their heads. Would that really do that, miss? It would have been the same as a wild beast show, like we heard they had in New York once. Had in New York once. India is quite different from Yorkshire, since Mary said slowly as she thought about the cover matter. Oh, okay. Hmm. India is quite different from Yorkshire, Mary said slowly as she thought the matter over. Oh, we skipped it. My word, I'd clear 'em clear off their heads. What the hell would you do that, miss? It'd be same as a wild beast show we had in work once. India is quite different from Yorkshire, Mary said slowly as she thought the matter over. I've never thought of it, but not all the time. Mm-hmm. 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 I never thought of that. Did Dickon and your mother like to hear you talk about me? Why, our Dickon's eyes nearly started out of his head, and they got all round, answered mother. But mother, she was put about you seeming to be all by yourself like. She said, has Mr. Craven got no governess for her, no nurse? And I said, no, he hasn't, though Mrs. Medlock said he would when he thinks of it. But she's saying he mayn't think of it for 2 or 3 years. I don't want a governess, said Mary sharply. But mother said you ought to have learning your books by this time, and you ought to have a woman to look after you. And she says, now, mother, you think just how you feel yourself in a big place like that, Pumpkin. Mm-hmm. So, mm-hmm. And she says, now, mother, you be thinking you feel yourself in a big place like that, wandering about all alone. No, mother, you do your best to cheer her up. She says, and I'm sure it'll be fun. Mary gave her a long, steady look. You two cheer me up, she said. I like to hear you talk. Presently Martha went out of the room and came back with something held in her hands under her apron. What does thee think? She said to the chifferkin. I've brought thee a present. A present? Exclaimed Mistress Mary. How could a cottage full of 14 hungry people give anyone a present? A man was driving across the moor peddling, Martha explained, and he stopped his cart at our door, and he had pots and pans and odds and ends, but Mother had no money to buy anything. Just as he was going away, our Elizabeth Ellen called out, Mother, he's got skipping ropes with red and blue handles. And Mother, she calls him out quite sudden, Hey, stop, Mr. How are they? And he said, tuppence. And Mother, she'd been fumbling in her pocket, and she says to me, Martha, that's brought me the measures like a good lass, and I've got up to 4 places to put every penny, but I'm looking to take a tuppence out of it to buy that child a skipping rope. And she bought one, and here it is. She brought it out from under her apron and exhibited it quite proudly. It was a strong, slender rope with a striped red and blue handle at each end, but Mary Lennox had never seen a skipping rope before. She gazed at it with a mystified, mm-hmm. So it's bet she has just this. No scare, no ouchies for the luck in the kitty cat in the dream. Whoop. She brought it out from under her apron and exhibited it quite proudly. It was strong, slender rope with a striped red and blue handle at each end, but Mary Lennox had never seen a skipping rope before. She gazed at it with a mystified expression. "What is it for?" she asked curiously. "For?" cried out Martha. "Does that mean have not gotten skipping ropes in India? Where all they got the elephants and the tigers and the camels? No wonder most of them buy. Just what I was talking for. Just watch me." And she ran to the middle of the room, taking a handle in each handle. As she ran to the middle of the room and taking a handle in each hand, she began to skip and skip and skip and skip, while Mary turned in her chair to stare at her. And the queer faces in the old portraits seemed to stare at her too, for her yeah. Mhm. All right, so she's got the skip rope, right? Yeah, skip, skip, skip. But Martha did not even see them. The interest and curiosity in Mistress Mary's face delighted her, and she went on skipping and counted as she skipped until she reached 100. "I could skip hard longer than that," she said when she started. "I've skipped as much as 500 when I was 12, but I'm not fat as I am now, as I might in practice." Mary got up from her chair, beginning to feel excited. "It looks nice," she said. "Your mother is a kind woman. Do you think I could ever skip breakfast like that?" Okay. Do, do, do. Mm, mm. Mary got up from her chair, beginning to feel excited herself. "It looks nice," she said. "Your mother is a kind woman. Do you think I could ever skip like that?" "You could just try it," urged Martha, handing her the skipping rope. "You can't skip 100 at first, but if you practice, you'll mount up. Not a skip as I've. Mm-hmm, 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 right. I'm sorry, I keep falling asleep. Mm-hmm. You just try it," urged Martha, handing her the skipping rope. "You can't skip 100 at first, but if you practice, you'll mount up. That's what Mother said. She said, 'Nothing will do her more good than skipping rope. It's the sensiblest toy a child can have. Never let her play out than in is the mighty sleep reservation scheduling.'" hmm It was plain a great deal of strength in Mistress Mary was not going. more beaches, do 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 do. More beaches, do 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 do. Babe, there's no official state limits about the creature. The Atlantic comes back with white hair and soft eyes, and she looks pretty. It was plain there was not going to be a great deal of strength in Mrs. Mary's arms and legs when she first began to play. Mhm. Okay, so we're not under this other insurance. Did they get an injury more than 6 weeks ago? Yeah. Mhm. 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 You just try it, urged Martha, handing over her skipping rope. You can't skip 100 at first, but if you practice that amount up, it's more than a good skipping rope. It's the simplest toy a child can have. Let her play in the wood, in the fresh air, skipping them, and stretch her legs and arms to give her some strength in them. It was plain that there was not a great deal of strength in Mistress Mary's arms and legs when she first began to skip. She was not very clever at it, and she liked it so much that she did not want to stop. But one of the things and run out and skip out of doors, said Martha. Mother said I must tell you to keep out of doors as much as you could, even when it rains a little bit, as wrapping up warm. Mary put on her coat and hat and took her skipping rope along with her. Martha put her coat on and hat and took her sensible rope over her arms. She opened the door and slowly went out, and the silly thought of something and turned back slowly. Martha, she said, they were your wages. It was 2 punts, actually. Thank you. She said it stiffly because she was not used to thanking people or noticing when they did things for her. Thank you, she said, and held out her hand because she didn't know what else to do. Martha gave her hand a clumsy little shake, as if she had not accustomed to this sort of thing either, and then she laughed. Ah, that was a queer old womanish thing, she said. If that'd been our Elizabeth Ellen, she would have given me a kiss. Mary looked stiffer than ever. Do you want me to kiss you? Martha laughed again. Nay, not me, she answered. If that were different, perhaps they'd want that theirself, but that didn't. Run off on along the side and play with that rope. Mistress Mary felt a little awkward as she went out of the room. Yorkshire people did seem strange. and Martha had always been a puzzle to her. At first she had disliked her very much, but now she did not. The skipping rope was a wonderful thing. She counted and skipped and skipped and counted until her cheeks were quite red, and she was more interested than she had ever been when she was born. The sun was shining, and the little wind was blowing, not a rough wind, but one that came in delightful little gusts and brought a fresh scent of newly turned earth with it. She skipped around the fountain garden, and up one walk and down the other. She skipped into the last kitchen garden, and saw Ben Witherstaff digging and talking to his robin, which was hopping about him. She skipped down the rock towards him, and he lifted his head and looked at her with a curious expression. She wondered if he would notice her. She really wanted him to see her skip. "Well," he exclaimed, "'pon my word, perhaps thou art a young un after all, and that perhaps thou got a child's blood in thy veins instead of sour buttermilk. Thou skipped red into thy cheeks as sure as thy name's Benson Weatherstaff. I wouldn't have believed that could do it." "I've never skipped before," Mary said. "I'm just beginning. I can only count up to 20. "Oh, keep on," said Ben. "The shape's well enough as a young un that's living in the heaven. You see he's watching thee," jerking his head towards the robin. "He followed after thee yesterday. He'll be at it again today. He bound to find out what that skipping rope is. You never seen one, eh?" Shaking his head at the bird. "That curiosity will be the death of thee some time if you don't look sharp." Mary skipped round all the gardens and round the orchard, resting every few minutes. At length she went to her own special walk, and made up her mind to try if she could skip the whole length of it. It was a good long skip, and she began slowly, but before she had gone halfway down the path, she was so hot and breathless that she was obliged to stop. She did not mind much, because she had already counted up to 30. She stopped with a little laugh of pleasure, and there, lo and behold, was the robin, swaying on a long branch of ivy. He had followed her, and he greeted her with a chirp. As Mary had skipped toward him, she felt something heavy in her pocket strike against her in each jump, and when she saw the robin, she laughed again. "You showed me where the key was yesterday," she said. "You ought to show me the door today. But I don't believe you know." The robin flew from his swinging spray of ivy on the top of the wall, and he opened his beak and sang a loud, lovely trill, merely to show off. Nothing in the world is quite as adorably lovely as a robin when he shows off, and they are nearly always doing it. Mary Lennox had heard a great deal about magic in her Aya stories, and she had always said what happened that moment was magic. One of the nice little gusts of winds rushed down the walk, and it was a stronger one than the rest. It was strong enough to wave the branches of the trees, and more than strong enough to sway the trailing sprays of untrimmed ivy hanging down from the wall. Mary had stepped close to the robin, and suddenly the gust of wind swung aside some loose ivy trails, and suddenly, still more suddenly still, she jumped toward it and caught it with her hand, and she did because she had seen something under it. A round knob which had been covered by the leaves hanging over it. It was the knob of a door. She put her hands under the leaves and began to pull and push them aside. Thick as the ivy hung, it nearly all was loose in the swinging curtain, and she crept over the wood and iron. Mary's heart began to thump, and her hats began to shake a little in her delight and excitement. The robin kept singing and twittering away and tilting his head to one side, as if he were just as excited as she was. What was this under her hands, which was square and made of iron, and her fingers found a hole in? It was the lock of the door, which had been closed 10 years, and she put her hand in her pocket, drew out the key, and fitted it into the keyhole. She put the key in and turned it. It took 2 hands to do it, but it did not turn. And then she took a long breath and looked behind her at the walk to see if anyone was coming. No one was coming. No one ever did come, it seemed. She took a long, long breath because she could not help it. She held back the swinging curtain of ivy and pushed back to the door, which opened slowly. But yes, as she looked above it and breathing in quite fast with excitement and wonder and delight, she was then inside the secret garden. Da-da-da! And so next chapter will be inside of the garden. How exciting. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. And I do apologize for the sleepy bits. Hopefully, it added something for you. Thank you so much. And until next week.